And this time we will focus specifically on the topic of metta, loving kindness. And we will approach this topic from the perspective of the discourses, the suttas. But we will also make use of some valuable teachings about metta from the Visuddhimagga, as well as Western psychology and sociology. But no worries, we'll keep it simple and practical. After all, the Dhamma has to be relevant to our own lives and to the path to liberation, to Nibbana. So, in this current day and age, a period of political, social, and sometimes also religious divide, what could be more important than finding a cure for all these issues? Moreover, many people these days, young and old, suffer from psychological disorders, such as ADD. Do you know what ADD stands for? Some say attention deficit disorder. Yes, that also. But what is even more problematic, from my perspective, is another form of ADD, namely what I call affection deficit disorder. A lack of affection, a lack of loving kindness, of care for each other. Or its prominent partner, ADHD. No? I'm not speaking about attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, but here I'm speaking about affection deficit and humility disorder. So it's the same acronym, but a little bit different meaning. It is because of a lack of empathy and humility that we face so many problems in our lives, don't we? Both on a small scale, as well as on a large and even on a global scale. That's why we should vaccinate ourselves with metta and make ourselves immune from anger, ill will and hatred. And wouldn't it be nice to have a vaccine, get a shot, a metta shot straight into your arm, and then afterwards you're walking around radiant, beaming metta to whomever we encounter. How would the world look like if you could get a shot of empathy, of love, of loving kindness, or of peace, tranquility? If you vaccinate yourself with the practice of metta, you don't need to be afraid of any side effects either. And now with some of these vaccines, you can see here on the slide, there's some small print there. Who knows what it says? It's almost too small for me to read. Actually, some of the small print is not completely in line with the Buddha's teaching even. I copy-pasted it from somewhere. It's the same with a real vaccine, you don't know the side effects. Sometimes you find out only later. But with loving kindness, the practice of metta, you don't have to worry about side effects. So in this way we can immunize ourselves from anger, aversion, hostility, and be at peace with other people, with the environment, with all beings. Anyway, today, rather than me giving a long-winded Dhamma talk, as I usually do, I will ask you a question related to metta first. And then you can think about it and answer by casting a vote on your phone or on your laptop. And only afterwards I will share my thoughts and explanations. For this purpose I have prepared 8 quiz questions related to the topic of metta, which we will cover one after another. Okay? As Brother John already invited and instructed earlier, please have a second device ready. If you're watching this on your phone, maybe you have a second phone. Or if you're watching this on your phone, maybe you have a laptop or a tablet goes by. You will need a second browser tab open. And you need to keep them open at the same time, because you also have to be able to listen to the Dhamma talk. And if you exit the quiz, you will be out. You lose your score. So as soon as you close that window, please don't do that. Or you can simply follow along also on Facebook, just viewing and seeing the quiz on the screen. But then, of course, then you don't have the opportunity to test yourself in a proper manner. Okay? Are you ready? Yes? Okay. Then I would say, without much further ado, let us start with the first quiz question. Maybe that's an easy one. I would be curious, what is the standard English translation of the Pali term metta? Is it compassion, or empathy, or love, or loving kindness, or answer E? A, B, C, D, or E. So now is the time for you to vote. Take out your phones, your tablets or your laptop. Key in Slido the answer. Usually will give you something between 20 and 40 seconds. Around half a minute. So this is a short question. Maybe it's quite quick to answer. But for some of the other later questions, you also have to be quick. Okay, give you a few more seconds because it's the first question. Okay, you can see still votes coming in. Finish off. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Let us see how you have voted. 89% of you have voted that loving kindness is the correct translation for metta, the established translation. Well, that's a large majority. And then a few have said compassion and some have said empathy. Let us have a look whether the majority is right. It's not always, but sometimes it is. It's correct. Loving kindness is indeed the correct translation of metta. So what is loving kindness? Well, to keep it simple, loving kindness, you can say, is the wish for the happiness of others. You want other people to be well and happy. From the bottom of your heart, you wish for their welfare and happiness. That's what we mean with loving kindness. Very simple. And there's a small difference actually between loving kindness and compassion. Sometimes these terms are mixed together. Loving kindness, as I just said, has as its object a person who is happy, or whom you imagine in your mental eye to be happy and well, maybe even smiling. Whereas compassion has as its object a person who is suffering. It could be suffering from physical ailments, or discomfort, or sickness, or mental problems. Anything. So with compassion, with karuna, there's the wish more, may you be free from suffering. Whereas metta has a person in its happy state as its object. So this is a small difference between metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion. Wow, 89% had the answer correct. Maybe my questions are too easy for you. Well, let's see. Second question. What is the difference between loving kindness and ordinary love? Bhima. Is there a difference? What is the difference? Answer A, metta is stronger. Or answer B, metta is cheaper. Or answer C, metta is free from attachment, love is not. Or answer D. They are actually only different in letter, but refer to one and the same thing. What do you think? Now it's time to cast your vote. You can see many votes are coming in already. Whoa. I can already see a little bit the results. A very clear vote. Very clear majority, it seems. Few more seconds. Okay, let us have a look at the results, at how you have voted. 97% have said metta is free from attachment, love is not. And then only 3%, maybe one person, says metta is stronger. Maybe you've noticed already that actually when you look at the quiz on your phone or on the laptop, you're actually a bit ahead of time. This is because Facebook is very slow, Mark Zuckerberg, everything, technology, they're not so good with this. So it's actually 15 seconds behind. So really what you hear right now on Facebook and YouTube, I have said that already 15 seconds earlier. But the quiz, the live quiz, that is actually real time. So that's why sometimes it's not completely in sync maybe. Never mind. The correct answer is answer C. That's at least what you think. And really the correct answer is also answer C. Metta is free from attachment. Love is usually not. It's also true that metta can be very strong, or sometimes stronger than love, but not by definition, I would say. In fact, most often love tends to feel stronger for most people. Love towards our children, our parents, our spouse and partner, that feels often stronger than the loving kindness towards all beings. But metta can also be stronger. One example I would like to give to illustrate the difference between metta and bema. There's this ancient story from Lady Visakha. She lived at the Buddha's time and she had a granddaughter. Her granddaughter was called Sudatta. And this story is recorded in the commentary to the Dhammapada. Dhammapada 213. So at one time, it so happens that the granddaughter of Lady Visakha fell sick and even passed away. So you can imagine the grief and sorrow that Visakha, the grandmother, had for this small child to pass away. Amazing, it must be heart-wrenching. So she eventually came to see the Buddha and seeking him out, seeking his counsel. And then the Buddha advised her or reminded her with one verse from the Dhammapada. What does the verse say? Bemato jayati soko, bemato jayati bhayam, bemato vipamuttassa, nati soko kuto bhayam. From love springs grief. From love springs fear. For one who is free from love, there is no grief. There's neither grief nor fear. At first it sounds a bit very strong, From love comes grief and fear, and you shouldn't even have love anymore. But here we have to understand, when the Buddha speaks about bema, love, it means the love that is associated with attachment, craving, clinging, which is not the same as loving kindness. And because of this craving, clinging, when this impermanent thing changes, or when we lose it, especially if it's another person, there's a lot of suffering. Whereas loving kindness also has this feeling of warmth, of unity with other beings, but it does not come with this attachment. And that's what makes it so much more of a wholesome quality. And loving kindness also does not distinguish between a dear person, a neutral person, and an enemy. Loving kindness at its highest stage doesn't have these boundaries. It's not limited only to family or friends. Metta should be universal. Therefore, usually in the suttas, when the Buddha explains how to spread loving kindness or how to practice metta meditation, there's a stock phrase that we often find in the suttas. For example, Majjhima 99 in the Subha Sutta. I give you just the English translation. So one spreads loving kindness in this way. I will pervading 1/4, one direction, with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second direction, like north, east, south, west. Likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above, below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Very beautiful. So you see here, the Buddha doesn't say, doesn't distinguish between a dear person, your close friends, for those whom we have a lot of metta and love and care, but then we forget about the others. No, it goes in all directions, north, east, south, west, above, below, all everywhere. There's actually a very nice passage by Albert Einstein. Yeah, maybe you are as surprised as I was when I first encountered it. He wrote a small essay, a small paper, and it's titled The Optical Delusion of Consciousness. So you can see still Einstein speaking about delusions, optical delusion, but of consciousness. What is he saying? He says, a human being is part of the whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, which is a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, still Einstein speaking. It's a kind of like a prison, whereby we restrict ourselves to our personal desires and to affection for a few people nearest to us, to our close family and friends. And then comes a very nice part. Einstein says, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living beings, all living creatures, and the whole of nature in its beauty. So even Albert Einstein discovered that actually compassion should not be limited just to a small circle of individuals, and encourages us to free ourselves from this prison of limited affection. Affection that is limited just to our friends and family members. So what Einstein here says, I think, is very much comparable and compatible also with the description that we find in the Visuddhimagga, one of the Theravāda meditation manuals, or actually the main meditation guidebook, which describes in the course of the metta practice the breaking down of the borders, of the boundaries. Which kind of borders are we talking about? It's not about the borders between countries, but about the breakdown of the internal barriers, the walls of the heart. So these are the borders and barriers that we have to break. And Einstein's statement is also very much in line with the Buddha's teachings, because the Buddha also encouraged us to spread loving kindness, to include all beings. Sabbe satta, sabbe bhana, sabbe bhuta. By spreading, now I'm quoting the Buddha, by spreading the metta above, below, around and everywhere, abundant, exalted and immeasurable. So this is the difference between ordinary love or carnal love and loving kindness. I really start to think that my quiz questions are too easy. Now the second question, almost everybody got it right. Let's have a look at number 3. They are not all going to be so easy, don't worry. Maybe this is another easy one. Question number 3. How many benefits of loving kindness are mentioned in the Metta Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya, Anguttara 11.16? 3? Answer B is 8. Answer C is 11. Answer D is 16. Or answer E, 227. So what do you think? How many benefits are mentioned in this sutta in Anguttara Nikaya? 3, 8, 11, 16, or 227? Okay. Hurry up. Few more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, still votes coming in. Okay. You have voted. The majority has voted for answer C, 11 benefits. But there are also quite a number of people for answer D, 16 benefits, and also some for answer B, 10%. This time not everybody will be right. I'm sorry. What's the correct answer? Answer C. 11 benefits are mentioned in this sutta. In fact, there was a small hint for the correct answer already in the question. Maybe some of you have seen it. Okay? The hint in the question is this. You see, it says, in the Metta Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya, AN 11.16. If you're familiar with the Anguttara Nikaya, which is a book where the suttas are sorted according to the number of items that they contain. So you have many suttas sorted, for example, the 3 things of that, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, or the 3 factors of a great man, or the 3 people who you should avoid. Many suttas, book of 3. Then many suttas, book of 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 11. So when you see AN, Anguttara Nikaya, means numerical discourse in English, 11.16, the number 11 tells you it's in the book of 11s. So most likely the list that is mentioned here, meaning the benefits of loving kindness, will be 11, because that's how these suttas are sorted. And then number 16 just means it's the 16th sutta. But maybe some people of you have been misled by the number 16, because I can see that also a few people have voted for 16. So maybe you've looked at the number, but you've taken the wrong number. Very sorry. By the way, small bonus question. Where does the number 227 come from? No. That is also a lucky number, especially for the Buddhist monks maybe. That's actually the number of monks' rules that we have in the Bhikkhu Patimokkha. The rules that we recite every 2 weeks, these are the 227 rules. So most monks, or every monk basically, knows the rules, and many of us, we memorize it even by heart in Pali. Okay. No? This question was not so easy. Let us see with the next one. Next question. Which is not a benefit of cultivating metta, according to Anguttara 11.16? So now we're talking about the previous sutta, and there are 11 benefits given, but one has been added. Now it's your job to find out which is the wrong one. Which one is not a benefit of cultivating metta? Answer A. One sleeps well, awakes well, and has no bad dreams. Answer B. One is dear to human and non-human beings. Or C. The devas protect you. Or number D. Also quite practical. Neither fire, poison, nor weapons can harm one. E. One is never again reborn in the 3 lower planes of existence, like the ghost, animal, and hell realm. Or F. One's mind gains concentration quickly. Is this a benefit of metta? G. One's complexion is bright. H. One dies unconfused. Or answer I. If penetrating no higher, one will be reborn in the Brahma worlds. Maybe you could become an Arya or an Arahant, who knows? But if penetrating, if advancing no higher, one will be reborn in the Brahma worlds. So which of them is not? Right? The question is, which of them is not a benefit? It's only one. All others are. No, I can see the answers coming in. Interesting. Much more evenly distributed. Okay. Finish off your votes. Time is running out. All right. Let us see and have a look at your results, of how you have voted. The not even majority, but most of you, of us, have voted, 45% have voted, one is never again reborn in the 3 lower planes of existence. You believe this is not the case. Then, who is number 2? If penetrating no higher, one will be reborn in the Brahma worlds. Don't know whether you can see this. I have to scroll down here. So you can see here, if penetrating no higher, one will be reborn in the Brahma worlds. Got 22% of votes. And then, neither fire, poison, nor weapons can harm one. Well, that doesn't sound very realistic, is it? So also, quite a few of you have voted for this one. Okay, let us see who is right and who is wrong. Correct answer is answer E. One is never again reborn in the 3 lower planes of existence, ghost, animal, and hell realm. Because It is true, loving kindness is very wholesome, and loving kindness does not lead to a bad rebirth. But here it says one is never again reborn in those planes. Never again in samsara. That's a bit much. So that guarantee does not come with metta practice. So yes, you might get a good rebirth, but then you can again come down later, or even as an animal or as a ghost at a later occasion. So that's actually the wrong answer. The others are all true benefits of loving kindness. You can sleep well and have good dreams. Also, people will like you, because just naturally we feel drawn towards individuals who are radiant with love and care. And you just want to be with such a person. And even animals feel attracted to this kind of individual. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes also even husband and wife or maybe youngsters when they meet before getting together as a couple. And sometimes I was wondering, why is this guy always have so many girlfriends and he always meets somebody new? He's actually not so good looking, I thought at that time. But knowing him a bit better, actually a very good character. It's the beauty that comes from inside. And the same also vice versa. The same for ladies. You don't need to use a lot of makeup to make yourself attractive. It's like the beauty coming from inside, from virtue, from love, from loving kindness, from compassion. People can pick up on that. And even animals, some of the animals. Also the devas may protect you. And another interesting one, that fire, poison and weapons cannot harm you. This one is correct, but also it applies only at a very high stage of metta. Just now you sit down 3 minutes and do a little bit sharing of metta, radiating metta. There I would not be so sure that this is strong enough to protect you to that degree that if somebody comes with a sword, you cannot be hurt. We are still looking for volunteers if anybody would like to try it out. Volunteers are hard to find, but supposedly, according to the sutta, yes, you're invincible during that state. Usually we would say during metta jhana, for example, when the mind is very strong, very focused, very radiant, very loving kind at the same time. Then one's mind gains concentration quickly. Metta is a great support for the practice, for the Dhamma practice, for samadhi. One's complexion is bright and radiant. And one will die, not a bad death. One will die unconfused. And if one doesn't attain any higher stages, then one will be reborn in the Brahma worlds. Also not so bad. Long lifespan at a very pleasant abiding. One that is not mentioned directly is metta is also the antidote for aversion, for dosa. And these two states cannot coexist in the mind at the same time. In fact, no opposing states, opposite states, can be in the mind at the same moment. So that's why every moment you cultivate metta, loving kindness, the mind cannot be jealous or have anger or aversion towards another person. So the more we cultivate that quality, the less what other people say, or sometimes when people are a bit rude, it does not touch you anymore. It's like a lotus flower, all the rain and water rains on it, it just burls down. It doesn't stick on it. So you can let those things burl down from your surface. Don't take it up. So that's how the metta waxing protects you. So you do that in advance, it protects you, and then whatever happens when you have encounters with others, it doesn't affect you so strongly. There's a nice quote from the Samyutta Nikaya, which I would like to share with you. Samyutta 10.4, Manipadda Sutta. One whose mind, all day and night, takes delight in harmlessness, who has loving kindness for all beings, for him there is enmity with none. Let me repeat. One whose mind, all day and night, basically is practicing night and day, takes delight in harmlessness, not being cruel, who has loving kindness for all beings. For him there is enmity. He has no enemies. There is enmity with none. Very nice. We have covered already 4 questions now. I'm curious now. I'm curious to find out whether we already have a leader or who is in front. Let us together have a look at the leaderboard. It's not the final. We still have 4 more questions to come, but probably we already have somebody top 5. Let us have a look. So if you have voted and participated directly in the quiz, then your name will show up here. Number 1, wow, CK, 4 out of 4 questions correct. And also very fast, because if multiple people have the same score, then actually the time will count whether you're ranked up or further below. Also Geraldine, 4 out of 4 points. Oh, I think you have also participated in my previous Dhamma quiz. I think you've been there also in the top 5, or if not even at the top rank. Oh, again, full scores until now. So all of you, you better take care, Don't let Geraldine win again. Then Hu Yi, also 4 out of 4 correct. John Lee, 4 out of 4. CSK. And then I see a longer list here. I have some honorable mentions. Number 6, KE. Number 7, Lim Lei Hun. Number 8, Opasa. Number 9, Chairman C. Number 10, NK Fu. Okay. All of you have 4 out of 4 points correct. So it's a tough race. But anyway, it's not really a race, We have no prize to give out. Don't expect any car to be given up. We have no car here to give out for free. We have no car, but karma. Good karma is what you can make by learning the Dhamma, participating, investigating, contemplating, but no car. Also, no holidays to give out, going to Hawaii. Well, we couldn't go anyway, right? Now with the MCO, we're not allowed to travel much. Maybe I could give out a face mask if you want. In fact, here in SBS, we get quite regularly face masks also offered. I think by now we could open a face mask shop and start selling them, maybe on the black market. Now, we're actually very grateful. People are taking care for us and seem to have a lot of metta for us. But by now we are well covered in face masks. But also we do actually sometimes also share with other monasteries and give out to others. Okay, so that was question number 4. Are you ready for number 5? We're zooming straight through. Let us see. We have 4 more questions. The last ones are a bit longer, so we have no time to waste. Question number 5. What is the main difference, do you think, between loving kindness meditation as described in the discourses in the suttas, compared to the descriptions in the Visuddhimagga, which is a, maybe historically speaking, a later text, which was finalized 500 of the Common Era. So if you were to count from the Buddha's passing away until the Visuddhimagga was formulated, there is actually 1,000 years in between. So sometimes there are differences, but there is also a lot of similarities, and we can learn from both, of course. But then here, related to loving kindness, what's the main differences? Main difference between loving kindness in the suttas compared to the Visuddhimagga? Answer A, the explanations in the discourses are more detailed. Or answer B, there is no difference, because the Buddha taught the discourses as well as the Visuddhimagga. So how could there be any difference? Or answer C, the discourses don't start the metta practice with oneself, followed by one's teacher, a dear, a neutral person, and then towards the enemy. Instead, they start directly with radiating metta towards all beings in the different directions. Is this maybe the difference? Or answer D. According to the discourses, metta towards oneself only needs to be practiced by individuals who have a lot of self-hatred or self-criticism. But others can start directly with one's teacher, dear, neutral, and an averse person. What do you think? It's a long question, so you won't have much time to read everything 2 times. So it's important that the first time when I read it out, you already listen and think along, so that you're fast with your vote. A, B, C, or D. Okay, it's come to an end. I think most of you have voted already. Let us see the result. 69% have voted for C, and then the rest is quite evenly distributed, 13%, 11%, and 7%. Okay, what's the correct answer? The majority is correct and right again. Answer C. Indeed, interestingly, in the suttas, there's no description that you should start with metta towards yourself first. Nor is there a distinction made between the teacher or guide, and then afterwards towards the dear person, neutral person, and then an enemy. But metta is done without distinction in all the directions. No. Actually, there's one exception in Majjhima Nikaya number 21, where the Buddha says that you should start with that person with whom you have a problem, or who mistreats you, who does not treat you kindly. Starting with him, you should share the metta, and then you also distribute it in all directions. Let me read out a short passage, the sutta from Majjhima 21. Because this is also a good guideline for our own life, a very valuable guideline here. Bhikkhus, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Their speech may be timely or untimely. Sometimes people don't find the right moment, and then you're in the middle of something and somebody says to you something, criticizes, or gives some feedback. Sometimes it's timely, it's the right time, sometimes it's untimely. True or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with good or with harm, spoken with the mind of loving kindness, or, to speak with us, with inner hate. Herein, because you should train thus. So now comes an instruction for how the monks should train themselves. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And now comes the important part. And starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train bhikkhus. So you can see here, he says, starting with him, with the person who just offended or said something rude, starting with him, you give him your metta first. Probably he needs it the most, because normally people are not rude or harsh when they are happy. Somebody who is well and happy does not treat others badly. So, from that logic also it makes sense to start with that poor fellow who is having a difficult time. Give the metta to him and then to all beings. Well, actually, this is the only discourse where this is mentioned, starting with that person. Normally, there's no distinction made, and you go straight in the different directions. Nonetheless, in the Visuddhimagga, it is recommended to start with individuals, first oneself, and then gradually towards all beings. And especially one starts then also with a dear person. And I would say this method is nonetheless very useful and very helpful, because it turns out that for many of us, it's actually easier to develop loving kindness towards one individual rather than a whole group, large group of people or all beings at the same time. Dr. Paul Slovich, who is a professor for psychology at the University of Oregon, Dr. Slovich studies human judgment, decision-making, and also risk perception. And he has published quite extensively on these topics. And one book, which is very interesting, is called If I Look at the Mass, I Will Never Act. If I look at the masses, at many people, I will never act, I will never help. The title alone will not help you much, but it's very interesting. And I've prepared a short clip for you, and we can watch it now together. It's a short video by Nicholas Christoph, and it's titled, How to Have a Positive Impact, One Person at a Time. So I invite you, let us watch it together. It's about 4 minutes. And then we will continue here and evaluate what we have learned evaluate it through the lens of the Buddhist teachings. Okay.
Is essentially about how to make a difference, and it addresses all those people who have this yearning to have an impact on the world, to find a measure of fulfillment, but don't really know how to go about that. And in working on the book, my wife and partner in this effort, Cheryl Wooden, one of the things we looked at is the kind of connections that link us to a cause, that make us want to give, that make us want to participate in something. You know, this arose, for me, this research arose when I was writing in my column for the New York Times about Darfur back in 2004, and I was going to villages that had been burned out, talking to people who were survivors of massacres, and it was frustrating to me that I couldn't get people to pay more attention to this. And meanwhile, at that very same time, here in New York City, there was a red-tailed hawk called pale male that had been kicked out of its nest off Central Park. And New York was all up in arms about this homeless hawk. And I thought, how is it that I can't generate as much passion about hundreds of thousands of people being slaughtered as people feel for this hawk. And that led me to this area of research, particularly by a guy called Paul Slovic. And it turns out that our engagement with a cause, it's not about numbers, it's not about classes of victims, it's really about two things. First of all, it's emotional, and it's with individuals that we have evolved, we were hardwired to feel a certain amount of empathy and connection, but with one other person whom we see, whom we can relate to, not with 100,000 people half a world away. The other thing is that we want to feel like we're having an impact, so we want some kind of a positive arc. We want to see a difference being made. And so when aid organizations talk about 5 million people at risk and make it sound terribly depressing, they're precisely hitting the buttons that turn people off. One of the things that really struck me was there have been experiments that asked people to do some math equations, solve some math problems first. And it turns out that if you do that, if you exercise the more rational parts of your brain, then you're less empathetic, you're less likely to contribute. Those of us who care about these issues, we need to figure out how to do a better job of storytelling about individuals and showing that there is a possibility of hope. Some of the research about our preference for helping individuals over classes of people comes from experiments where people were asked to contribute in some cases to this child. One that was used was Rokia, a girl from West Africa, versus a large group of people, millions of people suffering malnutrition in Africa. And of course everybody wanted to contribute to Rokia, to that girl. They wanted to help that girl. They didn't really care about millions of people being malnourished. But what was striking is that, even though we, I think, intellectually know that, one death is a tragedy and a million deaths is a statistic, that the point at which we begin to be numbed is when that number, when n equals 2. The moment you added not just Rokia, but had a boy next to her and said, you can help these 2 hungry kids, then people were less likely to contribute than if it was just Rokia. Likewise, people are less willing to contribute to a fund to save kids from cancer if the same amount of money is going to save not 1 life, but 8 lives. Really is this bias to help an individual. So we have to figure out, obviously the needs are vast, and so we have to figure out how to open these lines of communication to move people at an emotional level to help an individual, but then use that empathy then to broaden and to serve so many other people who need help.
So I found it very interesting. From that clip, what he's saying is that we are hardwired by evolution to feel empathy with one individual, but not with 100,000 people half a globe away. Because our ancestors lived in small tribes where people knew each other, not in a global community like nowadays. The survival of the tribe was very closely correlated to people's willingness to share resources and help each other. It didn't matter what happens hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. So therefore our brain is not optimally prepared for having loving kindness for countless big numbers of beings, or all beings. Whereas for one person, we are very good. We find it often very easy to have compassion, loving kindness for one individual or 2. So what's the conclusion then that we can draw from this research? The conclusion can be that we might want to use an individual to arouse our empathy, to arouse our loving kindness, and then spread the empathy and loving kindness and the willingness to help to other people. So we start with one person, but then spread that good feeling to all. So if one applies this principle to the Brahma-viharas, I think one can apply it to all, especially the first 3 Brahma-viharas. Loving kindness, compassion, and appreciative joy, mudita, they're all qualities where it's helpful actually to start with an individual. And only afterwards one goes in the directions. And in my opinion, the opposite actually could be the case for equanimity, Brahmavihara. Why? Because equanimity is a state where you don't want to be so close up. It's like stepping back, like getting a bit of a distance, getting an overview of the situation. So there it's actually very useful when you take away the individual person and then, okay, other people experience the same thing, there are hundreds and thousands of people like that. For equanimity, it's actually very helpful to distance ourselves. But for the first three Brahmaviharas, it can be helpful to look closely at one individual first. So in this way, we can actually make use of these findings from psychology and sociology to support our Dhamma practice and to inform our practice. And I'm also very happy that the Visuddhimagga also has this right. They already recommended this 1,000 years after the Buddha, a long time ago. So from practice, from practitioners, we also can understand many of those things. Speaking about modern science, let's have a look at the next question. Next question. Neuroscience, straight away. A mirror neuron, what is that? Is it a neuron that fires when an animal acts, as well as when the animal observes the same action being performed by another animal or another person? Or is it, answer B, a neuron that fires when an animal plays with firearms? Or answer C, a neuron that fires when an animal recognizes its mirror image, because it's called mirror neuron. Or answer D, a bit similar to C, but not exactly the same. A neuron that fires when an animal recognizes its image in a mirror and a sense of self and identification arises. What are these mirror neurons? What do you think? Few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End of your votes. Wow, that's a close race between answer A and answer D. Almost equal. 48% for A, 47% for answer D. Good to see. Not everybody will be right this time around. Answer A is correct. A mirror neuron is a neuron that fires when an animal acts, as well as when it sees and observes the same action being done by another person or another animal. In fact, in the 1980s and 1990s, the neurophysiologists, they had placed electrodes in the ventral premotor cortex of a monkey to study the neurons that are specialized for the control of hand and mouth actions. For example, when the monkey takes an object like a banana and twists it and turns it, certain neurons get activated in the brain. They could measure that. And during each experiment, the researchers allowed the monkey to reach for pieces of food and recorded from a single neuron in the brain of the monkey the measuring and the response to these movements. And they found out that some of the neurons, they would respond not only when the monkey himself picks up the food, but even when the researcher goes to the table and takes the banana away or does something with the banana. In fact, they found out about this by accident. And that the researcher was going there, and then the others looked at the screen and said, hey, the neuron is still firing. It's firing again now, even though the monkey is not doing anything. It's just looking at the researcher taking the banana or whatever it was away. So it's quite kind of interesting. And then later they did also experiments with human beings, but of course not on single neurons, because it turns out that we humans don't like it so much if they open our car and connect it directly with wires, not outside, inside. So we humans, we don't fancy that so much. But it seems the monkeys, for whatever reason, are really up for it. Well, most likely they don't have much of a choice. Anyway, eventually they did also imaging experiments using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, that have shown that the human inferior frontal cortex and also the superior parietal lobe, they are active when a person performs an action, but also when he sees another individual performing an action. And that happens also for physical activities, like professional sports people, like a football player. When he plays football, certain neurons get activated, especially the motor regions. But then when he watches football, he sees other players playing football, some neurons, they fire also in his brain that are the same as if he were to play. So in fact, actually, by observing, he gets better at that sport without even doing it. So if you're a little bit like me, a bit lazy sometimes, well, you don't have to do the sport yourself, you just watch it on television. Just watch others doing it. Anyway, a large number of experiments have actually shown that certain brain regions are active not only for physical movements, but also when people experience emotions. But then also like emotions like disgust, happiness, pain, jealousy, but also when we see another person experiencing these emotions. I think we all know this experience. You see a person trying to hit a nail into the wall, and then he misses the wall or the nail basically, and hits the hammer on his finger. And then the observer often, he just jump back and you shrink back. It's almost as if he hit your own finger. You feel the pain a little bit. And this is because of the mirror neurons. We experience to some degree, not exactly the same, but to some degree, similar emotion than the other person. What's the purpose? Well, mirror neurons may be important for learning new skills by imitation, because your brain picks up on what other people and other beings are doing, so you can learn faster. And also it's very important for understanding the actions, emotions of other people, because you feel it to some degree in yourself. When the person is sad, it drags you down. I think we know that. Also when somebody is very happy, it just cheers you up as well. The neuroscientist Marco Jacoboni, he argued that mirror neurons are the neural basis of the human capacity for important emotions such as empathy, loving kindness. He didn't use the Pali word METTA, but when he speaks about empathy, what he means something very similar to what we mean is loving kindness and compassion. So how do we apply that in our daily life? Well, since our brain mirrors whatever it sees, there's also a danger in that, because it's not only good things that you might see. For example, watching a movie, or actually many movies nowadays, there's a lot of violence. Every moment you see violence, your brain experiences violence. It's not the same as doing it oneself, of course, but you strengthen those neural pathways that are associated with violence. Every time you see sexual activity, like in pornography a lot, these desires will become stronger. Or desires for items through advertisement. How much exposure do we want to have to that? So these are things where we can be careful. Or computer games, video games, that often also, especially for boys, they like to play violent games. So yeah, the brain is also playing along. However, Dr. Manfred Spitzer, a German neuroscientist, he also found out that actually the influence of people is still much higher than that of movies or video games. So your mirror neural network fires stronger and better if it mirrors another person, a living person who's straight in front of you. And in fact, it's the children who learn this empathy from their mother in the very early stage of their development. And that's why it's so important that children and babies already experience the love and care, particularly of the mother. Doesn't mean that the father should never be at home and should not also care, but the mother seems to have a very important role in this context. And it's by experiencing the love and care from somebody that the mirror neurons in the baby develop and reciprocate. And the child itself develops the ability then later, when it grows up, also as an adult, to have similar qualities. So how do we bring that into our spiritual practice? Well, as I said earlier, it's probably good to be careful and cautious about movies that stimulate or show a lot of violence, or very stimulating in other areas like advertisement that arouse desires, craving all the time. But also being aware that actually the influence of people is even higher than that of what we see on the screen. Real people whom we meet. So this is not only true on the negative side, but also on the positive side. The Buddha often spoke about Kalyana Mitta, a good spiritual friend, or a teacher, a guide. If you surround yourself with people who have good qualities, your mirror neural network mirrors their good qualities. And without actually doing much, you pick up on some of these good traits. So, one surrounds oneself with people who are high in empathy, compassion, tranquility, wisdom. Some of that will rub off, hopefully. So I find it very fascinating, actually, how the mirror neurons support also the path, the spiritual path, and how we can make good use of that knowledge, but also be careful, because it can also go in the other direction. Okay, I think we have to move on. We have 2 more questions left, and then we will have eventually a winner of our quiz. Question number 7. From a Buddhist perspective, what do you think? Is it in line with the principles of loving kindness and wisdom to foster a child's education with the help of physical punishment? For example, by using a cane. No? Is it in line with the Buddhist principles to wanting to help the child's education through the help of physical punishment? Because sometimes they don't do as they should. What do you think? No. Answer A, no, it's not in line with the principles of loving kindness and wisdom, even if it appears as if it is the only option for dealing with some extremely difficult children. Or do you think, no, corporal punishment is a form of cruelty and should itself be punished by corporal punishment? Because if you do something like that to a child or to another person, you yourself should also be punished in the same way. Just fair. Or answer C. Yes, provided it is done mildly not overdoing it, while keeping the child's long-term benefit in mind. Okay. This can be a tricky one, I think. Also keep in mind, the question is not asking what works well or what does not work. This is not the question. The question is whether the answer is in line with the Buddhist principles, or this practice is in line with the principles of loving kindness and wisdom. Loving kindness can be wanting to help the child to become a proper human being, to mend his ways, to see his faults, for example, or to learn. Okay, give you a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's have a look at the results. Oh, another head-to-head race between answer A and answer C. Almost 50-50. Well, as it is usually the case, so far the majority has always been right. In all previous questions, majority has always been right. This time the majority is for answer C, and this time the majority is wrong. It's answer A. Answer A, no, even if it appears as if it's the only option for dealing with some extremely difficult children, it is actually not completely in line with the principle of loving kindness and wisdom, both principles. Let me explain a little bit, because I'm sure some of our listeners here may have a different perspective, and that's okay. But let me explain why I think answer A is correct, and why I think answer B and C maybe not. Answer A suggests that even though it appears there are some difficult children, they don't want to learn, they don't want to study, so the parents might want to help them and to want to learn things and grow up so that they will have a proper education and a good job later on. And that can indeed be rooted in loving kindness. But there's a second aspect here, which is wisdom. And wisdom also can include not only wisdom about the Four Noble Truths or 3 characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Wisdom also includes things like what is the proper means to achieve a goal. And there the question is this really the best way to achieve the goal of wanting our child get a good education and learn happily and advance in its studies? How will be the future of the child, his own mental development, his psychological development? These are all things that wisdom can contemplate. And there is where I see some problems. We'll come to that a bit later. Let me look at answer B also. Answer says, no, corporal punishment is a form of cruelty towards the child and should itself be punished by corporal punishment. So it's this kind of, if you do this to me, I will do the same to you. Well, you deserve the same treatment. An eye for an eye. So yeah, this also is not a Buddhist principle, even though it's commonly found out there in the world, but it doesn't seem to be rooted in loving kindness, nor in forgiveness, and it might work at times, but that's not exactly the question, you see. It was the question from a Buddhist perspective. And we'll see later what's the Buddhist attitude towards punishment, the Buddha's own attitude. Or answer C, if done mildly, while keeping the child's long-term benefit in mind. Well, often, even if you don't have much experience, or any experience to be honest, but I can well imagine, even if you just to mild punishment, physical punishment, there is still a strong emotion with it. Even if it's not for you, then certainly for the child. And that will have consequences for the child on the long run. And the future development, it's not so clear that this is to the long-term benefit of the child. It's true, maybe he will learn for this one exam, but then he will be afraid of going to school altogether if these things happen at school and the teacher is using physical punishment, or develops fear, or also low self-esteem to home or with his friends. There can be a whole host of negative side effects. Let us first have a look at the Buddha's perspective. Now, well, the Buddha was not teaching much about how to raise children, nor do I think that we monks are the ideal group to ask such questions, because some of us, including myself, we have never had children. However, we can still learn something from the Buddha, because actually he had children. He had monks, and had to deal with all kinds of misbehavior from the monks. And in fact, the monks, when they do something wrong, we also have a procedure of how to do that. What is the procedure? We have to seek out another monk, and then we open up our fault, our wrongdoing, and tell him, oh, I've done this or that. Maybe give an example. The monk maybe was so annoyed by a mosquito or an ant, or the ant is swimming in the toilet, and now he cannot flush down his business because there's some ants there, and maybe he just thinks, okay, I flush it down nonetheless. Actually, for monks, this is a Vinaya offense. If you know there's a living being, an animal there, or an insect, you cannot just flush them down knowing that they will die from that. Unless you think they will survive down there, then it's okay. So if a monk is doing that, he gets a Vinaya offense. And then he seeks out another monk and makes it open. Then the other monk asks him, do you see your offense? Do you see your wrongdoing? Then he says, yes, I see. Then the other monk says to him, in future, restrain yourself. And he says, yes, Pandey, in future I will restrain myself. That's it. You just confess it, you make it open, and you make it determination, a mental adhitthana, to do it better next time. And then that's all. There are no physical punishments involved, even for the serious offenses, not to speak about the small ones. The closest you can find is maybe one group of Vinaya rules that if you infringe on those, there's a little bit of a procedure that follows. Sometimes the rules that have to do with sexuality. For example, one rule is called Saṅghaṇāyaka. So, in that section, if a monk masturbates, shouldn't do, he's supposed to be completely celibate. This includes abstaining from masturbation. If a monk masturbates, it's not just enough to go to another monk and say to him, oh, that's what I did. No, he has to inform the whole Sangha, every single monk in the whole monastery, and he has to do that for a whole week, every day. And he loses temporarily his seniority. He will be the last who receives the food, even if it's already 10 vasa maybe, or 20 vasa. He will have to be at the end of the line. And nobody is allowed to bow to him during that period, during 7 days, for 1 week. And if he has concealed that offense, maybe at first he thought, I won't tell anyone. No, nobody will find out anything. So maybe for 2 weeks, he didn't inform anyone. Then he comes to his senses, actually, we have a Vinaya rule here, I want to be a good monk. Then he informs the Sangha. But then, for having concealed it for 2 weeks, these 2 weeks are added to his procedure. So for altogether 3 weeks, he will have to inform every single monk in the monastery every day. And if one monk comes into the monastery in the afternoon and he misses him, and the monk goes again, and the monk didn't know that there's a monk coming, another visitor, then it doesn't count. His observance doesn't count. He has to start all over again. So this is quite strict, but there's still no corporal punishment. So there's a bit of a social stigma involved, I would say. And so it's meant to motivate the monks not to commit these more serious offenses too easily. But there's nothing in the Vinaya also where it suggests that we would physically punish someone. When a teacher has disciples, like has younger Saṅghaṇāyakas, for example, maybe just 15, 17 years old, and they sometimes can be naughty, then he can give them some extra chores, Okay, tomorrow you have to sweep this whole area behind the monastery, or maybe shovel some sand from A to B, something that they need anyway, so he's giving him something extra to do. But no punishment in that sense. So it's much better to motivate and inspire. And if it doesn't help, then it doesn't help. Sometimes people don't take our advice. Well, that's the time for upekkha, for equanimity. Okay, tried my luck, for whatever reason, person doesn't want to understand it, there's not much I can do. Because also as a parent and as a teacher, you also have to protect yourself. Because the karma that you make is also your own property. So, but of course, it's not only dark karma. Because if you want to help a child to see its fault, to improve, there's also wholesome. And it can be motivated also by loving kindness. But then resorting to physical violence is not the ideal means. The Buddha spoke about non-cruelty, avihimsa. So we have here a combination a bit, There's the bright karma, the wholesome karma of wanting to help, but there's also the dark karma that will bring unblessed results. So it's a dark and bright karma that will lead to dark and bright, to mixed results. It's not purely wholesome, but also not completely unwholesome only, because there's also a wholesome intention involved. So it's dark and bright karma, as some sutras explain. Lastly, about this chapter, about this question. Just 3 days ago, by accident, I found a paper in the car here in SBS. I was just lying down on the front seat. It was written by Dr. Suryan from Sri Lanka. And he wrote an article, it's called "Caning is Not the Way." And he says there that caning will ricochet, it will backfire on the student's academic achievement and future development, which is actually contrary to the common belief that it will help the child get better at school. And a recent study in the US has shown that in the schools in America, where corporal punishment is the norm, students have performed worse academically than those in states that prohibit such punishment. And more disadvantages have also been pointed out. If a child or a young person is often subject to corporal punishment, it leads to introversion, to fear, also to antisocial behavior. They might themselves become bullies and fighters. There's also deteriorating peer relationships. And they will surely develop strong dislike against authority. So the question is that really worth it? Is it really loving kind to deal or to treat our children like that? It's true they will sometimes not do what we ask them. But as Dr. Suryan concludes, caning is degrading and humiliating. It should be prohibited. Teachers should be encouraged to develop positive behaviors and behavior supports, which have proven effective in reducing the need for harsh discipline. And when nothing helps, that's the time for equanimity. In the Equanimity does not just mean grinding your teeth and being angry about that but saying nothing. Real equanimity means peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. So there is something unpleasant, but you make mentally peace with it. Often you cannot change it anyway, so you come to a space of peaceful coexistence, letting go. Maybe at a later time we can help more actively. Speaking about time, we're running out of time. We have now covered 7 questions. We have only one more left. And I would like to see, before we come to the last question, I would like to have a look at the leaderboard. Whether we have a clear leader already or whether it's still a head-to-head race. Let's just look at that together. Wow. Yes, there have been some changes. Top 5. KE, 7 out of 7. CSK, 7 out of 7. Kylie, 7 out of 7. But then, number 4, CK, 6 out of 7. And John Lee, also 6 out of 7. And then we have some of the earlier people still in the top 10. NK Fu, Opasa, Li Chuan, Kong Meng Shen, and AM. Okay. Some of the names I don't know because I don't know whether it's male or female. Sometimes also interesting. Who knows more Dhamma? The man or the women? Well, how many of them are lady? How many are monastics? Well, it doesn't sound like monastics here. Opasa could be, it's probably a monk name. It could also be a nun, actually. It's the long A at the end. Yeah, well, it seems that the monks and nuns are not performing high here. So now comes the last opportunity. If you want to catch up, there's only one more question left. Shall we do it? Let's go for it. Last question. What is the relevance of metta on the path to liberation? Number A, first one. Since metta is one of the 10 perfections, the 10 paramis, it is absolutely essential on the path to liberation. Otherwise, only 9 perfections would be fulfilled. Or answer B, the practice of metta only leads to rebirth in the Brahma worlds, but cannot be used for vipassana practice, since it deals with concepts, like people or beings to whom we send metta, rather than ultimate reality. It is therefore not absolutely essential on the path to liberation. Or answer C, regular practice of loving kindness can function as a support on the path to liberation, but is not a necessary requirement. A, B, or C? Okay, finish off your votes. Running out of time. Few more seconds. All right, let us see how you have voted. 56% say answer A is correct, because metta is one of the 10 parami, which is correct. It's absolutely essential on the path to liberation, otherwise there are only 9 perfections. But then also so many people say answer C, even though it's not the majority, that the regular practice of loving kindness can function as a support for liberation, but it's not a necessary requirement. Let us see What is the correct answer? Majority? Majority, I'm very sorry for you. You're not correct, because answer C is correct. The regular practice of loving kindness can function as a support on the path, but not necessarily. Let me explain. First off, Noble Eightfold Path. Second path factor is Samma Sankappa, right thought. Right thought is defined as thoughts that are free from sense desire, from ill will and cruelty. So the mental state of non-ill will includes metta. So non-ill will, metta is the opposite of ill will, so non-ill will definitely includes metta. But it also includes a neutral, more neutral attitude towards others, right? Not every moment where you don't have ill will and anger, not every such moment you have at the same time a lot of metta. No, it's just a lack of ill will. So we should not equate completely the two. Like sometimes when you're driving the car from A to B, just looking out the street, looking at the trees, you don't have ill will that time, I hope. But it doesn't mean that you're beaming with loving kindness, right? So there is something in between where there's neither ill will nor metta. Yet, metta has its role in the Noble Eightfold Path, and there can also be this active aspect of not just lack of ill will, but also the true loving kindness. So that's already the first part where we can find it. In the Noble Eightfold Path, in the second path factor. But I would also like to show you some suttas where you can more clearly see the potential for metta on the path to liberation. But before we do that, I would like to just a few words. We see the quote already, it's okay. I just want to say a few words also on the answer A, which is that metta is one of the 10 perfections of the 10 parami. And without metta, it's only 9, right? Which is true. The thing is, there's no sutta where it speaks about the 10 parami. Nor is there a sutta, not even the commentaries, would say that the parami are necessary to be fulfilled if you only want to get liberated. But they become very important, supposedly, on the path to become a future Buddha. Now, in fact, also on a lower level, according to the tradition, they're also important for awakening. However, none of that is found in the early discourses. And there's another set of 5 qualities which the Buddha often mentions when he speaks about a person's potential for awakening, which are the 5 faculties, the 5 spiritual faculties. So faith, energy, mindfulness, wisdom, and one is concentration, or the 7 awakening factors also he often mentions. But the 10 parami are actually interestingly not found, even though all these qualities are found in the suttas, but not as a set. So the first argument for that reason already is not valid. So let us look at some suttas that relate of how can be the potential for metta towards liberation. The first one is from Anguttara 4.126. Here, because some person dwells pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, the first, third, fourth, above, below, across and everywhere, and to all as to himself, he dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity, without ill will. He contemplates, and now comes the important part. He contemplates. So first he's doing normal loving kindness practice, but then he contemplates whatever phenomena therein of that practice, of this metta practice. He contemplates is phenomena that pertain to form, feeling, perception, volitional activities, and consciousness, which are the 5 aggregates. So, of that metta practice, all these factors that are related to the feeling during that practice, the perception, the volition, the consciousness, and the body, he contemplates those things as impermanent, anicca, as suffering, as a disease, as a boil, a dart, misery, as an affliction, as alien, as disintegrating, as empty, as non-self. So basically, this is proper vipassana practice. Yeah? He contemplates the state itself, the metta, the perception of loving kindness. That's also impermanent. It was not there first, then you arouse it, and then it ceases again. It's also unsatisfactory. It's dukkha in that sense, because it doesn't last. It cannot give you lasting happiness forever. So it's also dukkha. So he contemplates it as a boil, as a dart, impermanent, and also as non-self. You can't control it. With the breakup of the body, doing this practice, then with the breakup of the body after death, he's reborn in companionship with the devas of the pure abodes. Now, what are the devas of the pure abodes? These are anagamis. Anagamis. That's just the next step below the arhat. So, based on the practice of loving kindness, then using that practice and contemplating the 5 aggregates involved with that mental state, the perception of loving kindness, he contemplates it as impermanent, as non-self, for example. And by that practice, this combination of practice, he makes it all the way to the Suddhavasa, to the pure abodes. The next quote, I'll show you one more, that illustrates the power of metta for reaching liberation, especially when it's practiced on jhana level, when it is supported by strong samadhi. Anguttara 9.36. Bhikkhus, I say that the destruction of the Danes, of the asavas, occurs in dependence from the first jhana, or the second jhana, the third, the fourth jhana. I say that the destruction of the Danes also occurs in dependence on the base of the infinity of space, infinity of consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception, and the cessation of perception and feeling. So these are various states of samadhi. In each of those can function as a base for the destruction of the Danes. Not all of them together. So for each one, the same thing is said and repeated. So the first 4 jhanas, and then the formless attainments, the classical ones, all the way up to the cessation of perception and feeling. Here, secluded from sense pleasures, a bhikkhu enters and dwells in the first jhana. And then, remember from before, he considers whatever phenomena exist therein, pertaining to form, feeling, perception, volitional activities, and consciousness. He contemplates them as impermanent, suffering, and illness, a boil, a dart, misery, affliction, alien, disintegrating, empty, and non-self. He turns his mind away from those phenomena and directs it to the deathless element. What is the deathless? Nibbana. How does he do that? So first he practices the jhanas, then he contemplates the 5 aggregates that have just practiced the jhana as a boil, dart, impermanent, also the jhana itself. And then he turns his mind away from that and inclines it towards Nibbana. He does not yet have Nibbana, he is not yet an arahant, but he inclines it there, so he can take Nibbana as an object even beforehand. How does he do that? He contemplates. This is peaceful, this is sublime, the stilling of all activities, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, Nibbana. So he inclines his mind towards Nibbana. If he is firm in this, he attains the destruction of the Danes, means he becomes an Arahant. But if he does not attain the destruction of the Danes, then second prize, because of that lust and liking for the Dhamma, because of that delight in the Dhamma, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he becomes one of spontaneous rebirth, due to attain final Nibbana there, without ever returning from that world. Again, this stands for the attainment of non-return. The 5 lower fetters have been abandoned already, so he is an Anagami. How? Based on the support of the strong Samadhi from the 4 jhanas, or can also be the formless attainments, and contemplating that state as impermanent, non-self, and so on, and then inclining the mind towards liberation, cessation. And then it becomes an Arahant or an Anagami. So, we know that loving kindness can be coupled and supported by strong Samadhi. For example, the 1st jhana, the 2nd jhana, and so on. So, if you do that, then that practice, you can take it all the way to final liberation and Arahantship. So, to conclude, while the practice of metta is not absolutely necessary on the path to liberation, there are so many other ways of how you can practice. It can function as a basis for vipassana practice and liberation. That's why answer C is correct. Okay, this was question number 8. Well, I'm really curious whether the leaderboard stays the way it was, or whether we have now a new leader or a winner. Let us have a look at the final result. Are you ready? I give you a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who won? KE. Wow. 8 out of 8 points. Congratulations. Well done. Also very fast. Kylie. Also 8 out of 8. Only 2 people. Yeah. We're quite a sizable group today. Only 2 have managed all 8 questions correctly. But John Lee,
Bante, we could not hear your voice. Okay, thank you. Bante, your mic may be disconnected. Could you try again? Could not hear you, Bante. Sorry, brothers and sisters, there's some technical issues. Bante will be back in a bit, okay? Meanwhile, stay patient. Thank you. Yes, Bante?
Okay, just finish
Yes,
off
we can
the
hear
screen
you
sharing.
now. Yeah,
Okay,
we can hear
very
you
good.
now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. So I assume somewhere at the end of the quiz, you were logging out, but I see you have posted, we have seen the results, so it should be okay. So we can, I think by now we can conclude that hearing the Dhamma, listening to Dhamma talks, reading the suttas, if you do this a lot, you will usually find this kind of quiz questions quite easy to answer. And if you did that, well, yes, congratulations. Either way, reading and listening to Dhamma, especially the suttas, provides us with the tools and perspectives that we actually need to live our lives not only to the fullest, but also skillfully and meaningfully. But we must not stop there. Some people, they just learn a lot, study, and then that's it. No, we must not stop there. The knowledge that we gain by reading and listening needs to be put into practice, in meditation as well as in our daily lives. So we have now spent quite a significant amount, if you look at the clock, it's quite a long time speaking about metta, trying to understand it in detail, trying to understand the difference to normal love. But there's one thing which we haven't done yet. We haven't yet put it into practice. So I think we still have, well, it's up to you whether you want to stay, but those who are still interested, now is the time to put it into practice. I would like to invite all of you to do this together, by listening and chanting along with me some verses from the Karaniya Metta Sutta in Bali and English. And I trust that everyone memorizes the entire Karaniya Metta Sutta in Bali, right? No? No worries. We've prepared a recording where you can just chant along while reading the text from the screen. Just like when you go to a karaoke bar, Just imagine we are here like a karaoke bar full of people chanting the Metta Sutta. How wonderful. And the most important thing during this practice will be not that you hit the right note at every syllable, nor that the 100% exact Pali pronunciation, but to open our hearts and radiate loving kindness and empathy towards all beings while reciting these verses. Let's do this together. Are you ready? Feel free to tune in.
Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sattva satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be, well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be, may all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sattva satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be, well and secure may all beings be, well and secure may all beings be, may all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sukhino va khemino hontu, Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart.
2 more minutes.
Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sukhino va khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart.
That was nice. So this is an easy way, you wait for something, waiting for the bus, public transport, for dentist, any fun activity like this. You can always come back to this metta chant, and this will make the mind wholesome. And if you do this a few times a day, the heart opens up, and you feel the connection with beings, and you feel like being one, almost like being part of one big whole. And the way we interact with each other is very different, and the mind is supercharged with metta or not. It's a big difference. One thing that I like to do when I walk, in terms of metta practice, sometimes I imagine myself like a radar station. Like at the army, they have or military, they have the radar. And then you see whenever an airplane or a ship comes close to your area. So sometimes I imagine myself I'm like a radar station, and any person or being who comes into my close area, I will shoot my metta, I will beam my metta towards that person. For example, if I walk down the hill from SBS towards Taiping, collecting alms food. Then on the way down, any person I meet, I try not to miss anyone. So, because I'm like a radar station, so I have to catch everyone and send metta to him or her. This includes also, the small animals, like the ants, insects. So you don't want to miss anyone. Sometimes it can be quite busy, especially if you walk close to a main road. So even cars driving by, motorbikes. So you can gamify it a little bit. This way make it interesting maybe. So anyway, this is for walking and for doing things. Whereas the metta chant, that can be done in any posture. I know that some people often request that chant, or how can we listen to that afterwards? Maybe somebody can post the link on as a comment later, and then you can, if you want, you can listen to it again and again. It has been uploaded also to YouTube. So I think we have talked a lot, practiced a lot, and I think it's getting late and we should slowly come to an end of my talk. And I would like to summarize quickly some of the topics that we have covered throughout this session. So thinking back, remember, we're speaking about the difference between loving kindness and ordinary love. The normal love is usually bound up with attachment, craving, clinging, being needy, whereas loving kindness does not have that. It's universal and it's not bound up with attachment. Then we spoke about 11 benefits of loving kindness, starting from sleeping well and having good dreams. Oh, that's good already, all the way to more important or serious thing as a support for concentration, having a good death even, and then having also exceptionally good rebirth, and can even attain higher stages of awakening. We also spoke about the advantage of starting loving kindness with an individual before spreading it to all beings, because it's so difficult to arouse loving kindness with all beings. Well, how do all beings look? Their face. Well, difficult to imagine even, right? So, starting with an individual, could be a dear person, somebody you like, and then generating the loving kindness, making it really strong, and then sharing it towards all beings. That can be very advantageous. We also learned about mirror neurons, which, according to this neuroscientist Marco Iacoboni, he says they are the neural basis of our human capacity for emotions, such as empathy, which is very similar to what we Buddhists mean with metta. We learned that there are more effective ways of helping children to improve at school and in life than corporal punishment, which can lead to very serious long-term issues for the child and then even for the later adult. We discovered that loving kindness is not only beneficial in the here and now, but can also lead to good rebirth and even to final liberation, nibbana. Then, with the help of the quiz, you could put your own proficiency and knowledge about loving kindness to the test. And we discovered who were the foremost metta experts in Malaysia. Now we know. If you have a question about metta, don't come to me. They are the people in the high score, the top 5. You can call them. And then lastly, we practiced metta together with the help of the metta chant. So we would like now to close our morning session with the wish that you will all be able to develop loving kindness to its full potential. Not only so that you can sleep well and have nice dreams, but also as a foundation for good relationships, for the overcoming of the 5 hindrances, for the establishment of samadhi, and even as a support on the path to liberation. Last but not least, so that nobody will ever diagnose you with ADD, affection deficit disorder. But instead, through the power of your metta, you will be loved by humans and devas alike. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.